Hi, I want to share with you my thoughts for this week to help guide you through the assignments that seem like a lot, especially because we have a shortened week. But I think you'll find the reading of night to go quickly, and I think you'll enjoy the book. First, let's talk about last week, the discussion board. Applause! I don't know if you can hear me clapping. I believe I've been teaching this class, I know I've been teaching this class for close to 20 years now, amazingly. And I have never had a discussion board quite like this, and that is a good thing. I'm not looking for the amount of knowledge each of you knew. I was looking for the sincerity of your thought, how you tried to pull your ideas together so that you could say, well, I learned this, and I learned this, and I learned this, and I'm not sure about this. And then for you to interact with each other in a way that expands what you said. You should be reading the responses to your writing because these responses will help you expand what you already know. And why is all of this important as I screwed up the thing? Because what I was trying to do last week, and this is a summary, was to share what you knew to help build a scaffolding. You know what a scaffolding is? It's kind of like there's two poles and then there's like a wooden plank on each level, and you build up those, you put things on different levels. Think of it sort of as your kitchen cabinet, and you have multiple shelves in that kitchen cabinet, and you put different ideas on different shelves instead of different cans or different things on different shelves. And that's what I was helping you build, this scaffold, so that this is what I knew about the Holocaust. And then you added to that scaffolding by reading about what your classmates knew. And when you read that, that adds on to your scaffolding and sort of makes it stronger because you know more. Your supplies get stronger when you have 10 cans of Campbell's soup instead of 5, okay? That kind of thing. And the film that I had you watch last week, Night and Fog, provided images which that help you envision what's going to happen at night and what Wiesel experienced. And since memory is formed through images, we don't form memory in our brains through words. We do through images. And that's why I provided Night and Fog, so that you have these images in your head that you can recall as you're reading Night. Moving to this week, Night is a literary memoir, and I have some links in the assignment for you to look at that will help you with this. I want to explain it a little bit more. A literary memoir is a personal experience of what the author felt, experienced, and knows. And this personal experience is a slice of life. A memoir is not an autobiography that starts when the person was born to the point in the person's life. A literary memoir is always first person because you're telling your story, the author's telling their story. This is just a slice, and in Wiesel's life, it's from about the time he was 12 or 14 till he got out of the camps at 16, so it must have been 14 to 16, somewhere in there. The contract with the reader is that you're telling the truth as you know it. Now, you have to believe the reader is telling the truth. However, I'm going to skip to artistic license down there. I should have had those twisted around. Sometimes there are things said in a memoir that aren't exactly true. For example, in Wiesel's Night, he mentions that the character Moshe is a combination of a number of people in the town, and it was just easier to have one character represent all these ideas. There was a Moshe, and he did work with Wiesel, but it was a compilation of a lot of different things. I was real disappointed when I heard that, but they take that to help move the story along when there's an artistic license, usually. It's not meant to, sorry, I'm getting froggy here. It's not meant to lie to the reader. It's to move the story along. Memoirs, literary memoirs, are different from memoirs that you just pick up from a current celebrity. These are memoirs that use artistic language, and one of the most famous phrases from Night is, "Never shall I forget that night. The first night in camp, which has turned my life into one long night, 7 times cursed and 7 times sealed." And when you think about that and then you think of his experiences, you see that night is something that is a little bit different than just telling a story. This week, what are you doing? Watch the film of Oprah and Weasel. I do not like Oprah Winfrey. I'm sure none of you remember her show on TV, network TV. It was pretty bad, I thought. I didn't like her. She now has her own network own. But it's important for you to watch that film because you see Wiesel at Auschwitz, the camp at which he was taken to when he was about 15 years old. Now, what the book is not, it's not a novel. Do not refer to it as a novel. A novel is another literary format that is fiction. A literary memoir is nonfiction. So don't refer to it as a novel. We'll read a novel later in the course. This is a true story. This is nonfiction. Nonfiction means true. Fiction means made up. It's a literary memoir. Now, there are 2 logs due on Night, one on the 7th and one on the 10th. And there are detailed explanations for that in the course site. Be sure you go to content rather than just go into the Dropbox because I have lots of links in this week you need to follow. The quiz is due the 10th, and there are discussion boards due on the 7th and the 10th. The 7th is your first response, and the 10th is the responses to your classmates. Basically, the prompt for the discussion board is compare Night and Night and Fog. And what I'm talking about is seeing the similarities and how Night and Fog helped inform you about Night. A Venn diagram is very helpful. You might want to put things in here that you think are similar, what was different about Night, what was different about the film, and then concentrate writing here. It's sort of a different type of chart, but it'll help you focus your writing. Now, on a personal note, and also to help you understand what might be going on with you as you read Night, it's emotional. My personal experience with reading Night was in a humanities class in my sophomore year at Michigan State University. Go Green. I know I've just pissed some of you off. Oops, I swore, sorry. The personal experience with Night was I knew I had a couple hours, 3 hours or so before I had to go, or I was planning to go to the bar with some friends. When I was in school, way back when, in the dark ages, when dinosaurs roamed the earth, there was an 18-year-old drinking age in Michigan. So there I was, 19, going on 20, and I thought, hey, I'll knock out Night. It's short, only 100 pages, before I go to the bar with my friends. It was Thursday night pitcher night, $1 a pitcher, and I always liked to go and dance that night. So I sat down to read Night, and I read it, and I didn't go to the bar. I just didn't want to be joyous that night and dancing that night after reading what happened to Wiesel and his family. It was my first experience with reading anything from the Holocaust. I never read The Diary of Anne Frank when I was growing up. I really had never read anything about the Holocaust except what a 6th grade teacher would scream at us about, how Hitler made lampshades out of Jewish skin, which they think is false, but how he'd go around the room and he'd point at people and say, "You've got dark hair, dark eyes, you'd be gone." And the Holocaust scared me. So that was my past experience. And then I read Night, and I was just devastated. What had happened was a transaction between me and the text, this emotional outpouring, with my limited experience about the Holocaust, making me think that this was the most horrific thing I had ever read about and would ever read about again. And that's probably almost true. So I want to talk about Louise Rosenblatt, who lived in the 1930s. I think she died in the 80s, I think. She wrote in her one of her first books that there's always a transaction between the reader and the text. And to explain that more, I'm going to play this YouTube video. It's only 3 minutes, but it's really important for you to understand what reader response is, for you to understand what's going on with you as you read this book, and you and your personal experiences interact with what Wiesel is saying. Oh, here we go. Get rid of that and play.
Response theory. Reader response theory talks about. Today we're going to talk about reader response theory and what happens when reader response theory talks about how people back in the and what happens when people read. It was developed by a woman named Louise Rosenblatt back in the 30s. The basic premise of reader response theory is to describe what happens when.
Let's start this over. I'm sorry, I don't know what happened.
Today we're going to talk about reader response theory. Reader response theory talks about how people read and what happens when people read. It was developed by a woman named Louise Rosenblatt back in the 30s. The basic premise of reader response theory is to describe what happens when readers and text come together. It's what's called a literary lens, a literary theory, a critical theory. It's what you study when you are an English major in college. But right now we're going to take a little taste of it because it's important to understand this. Have you ever had an English teacher ask you to make a connection to a book or a story? Have you ever had an English teacher say, "What does this remind you of?" Or "What questions are stirred when you read this text?" He or she knows about reader response theory. They know that this is naturally what readers do when they read. The theory goes like this. There's a reader, and that reader walks around with his or her own personal ideologies, her own beliefs, her own experiences from life. And he or she takes those experiences and beliefs and reads text. And the text has its own features, its own characteristics. Texts have characters, they have settings, they have plots, they also have beautiful language. And when the reader and the text come together, the reader with his or her own beliefs, the text with its own features, that is how meaning is made. That's what happens when we read. So it's important to think about, well, who am I when I approach the text? What is it about me that makes me pay attention to certain particular aspects about the text? For example, why am I drawn to a certain character? Do I have personal beliefs that resemble that character? So these are the things to think about when we think about reader response theory. Of course, surrounding all of this experience are different contexts, different situations. For example, the way you read text is different when you're sitting on the beach in the summer as compared to when you're in an English class and the English teacher is asking you questions like, does this remind you of anything? So it's important to realize that the reader and the text and the context all work together to create that meaning. And it's a meaning that just you might have. There might be people who have similar backgrounds and create a similar meaning, but yours is going to be always slightly different because you are a slightly different person. And that's what we're going to talk more about.
Okay, let's get back to the PowerPoint. You might want to, if I can go back to this a second, watch this a couple times, because I watched it a couple times before I decided to use it and show it to you, and I picked out different things each time. So that's something that you probably want to look at a couple times, rewind this video and stuff. Okay. Use Remind this week as you need to ask questions. If I find, as I did in my English 111 course last week, the same question being asked, then I usually make a big announcement to everybody about it, because everybody has that same question. So it's important that you use Remind and talk to me through that way. If it's a big issue, then you probably need to use email. Enjoy the rest of the holiday. Not much left. Today's Monday, and you might be watching this on Tuesday or Wednesday and thinking, yeah, well, it's over. I hope you had a good one. And then I will see you at the discussion board, and I look forward to a fantastic discussion like you had last week.